The input repetition method. So guys, this video, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm basically going to explain my way of learning new words for people that kind of don't really know how to learn new words in a language. This is the super easy, super effective way, and I haven't really seen anything better than it. So one of the biggest pain points of language learning is obviously learning new words and remembering new words and not having to go through a bunch of pain and like enjoying it as well. I'd think are all things we want to do. Unfortunately, I've written most learners, this is basically everyone, doesn't really know how to actually learn words properly, and this is why trying to remember things is really frustrating because you're not even learning it in the right way. So don't worry guys, this video is going to take away basically any pain you have, hopefully, with not knowing the right way to learn new vocab. So by the end of this video, you'll fully understand the input repetition method, which is my system of learning new words. It works super effectively, and it's quite enjoyable if you do it the way I'm going to teach you. So yeah, if you do like this kind of educational content, definitely hit the subscribe button. It does make me feel better about all the time I put in to help you guys for free. But yeah, let's go. So in a nutshell, let me just explain the input repetition method before we actually go in how to use it. So the input repetition method is how you learn new words in a language. It's 2 steps, input and repetition. Input is basically any kind of reading or listening. So we're talking about consuming content. Consuming just means looking or like reading or listening to something and putting it into you. So books, movies/TV, podcasts, YouTube, anything you would consume, technically songs as well, but they're a little bit more difficult, so I'm not going to talk about them in this video. And the second step is repetition, so memorizing unknown words in these things that you consume, generally with flashcards. The reason, don't worry, I'm going to actually go into how it works, but that's just it in a nutshell. The reason the input repetition method is so effective is because it takes advantage of how your brain actually learns new words. So you need to consume content to actually encounter new words. That's obvious. You're not to learn new words, you obviously need to find words you don't know, right? That makes sense. And to do that, the most enjoyable and the best way to do it isn't just by looking at lists of words online. It's to actually encounter these words in content. So whether you're watching a show you enjoy, reading a book, even if it's like an easy book to read as a beginner, that's fine. That's how you encounter the words. And then obviously just reading them isn't going to get them into your brain. You need to actually use repetition, and that's how you use flashcards. But yeah, that is how the input repetition works in a nutshell. Input repetition method, sorry. Here's how we actually use it. So I'm going to go all the way through it, don't worry. Step 1, input. So in this step, we're going to consume content. I've already said what consuming content means. Basically just reading books/texts online if it's like a practice paragraph, listening to a podcast, watching YouTube vlogs, TV, movies, etc. That is consuming content. I will also note while we're here, the content should be comprehensible input. So if you don't know what that big word means, that's fine. It just means content that's not too hard and not too easy. So if you completely understand what it is, you can still watch it for pleasure, but just understand you're not really learning any new stuff as much because you basically understand all the words in it. And if it's completely unknown, you don't know any words, it's probably going to be too hard and a bit frustrating. So when you're reading a book or watching a show, for example, try and make sure you understand maybe like at least 20 to 30% of the words, something like that. It doesn't really matter as an exact number, but yeah, make sure you can kind of get the gist of what's going on, even if you don't understand a lot of words. That is comprehensible input, and that is kind of the best way to learn because you can still kind of understand what it's about. You just need to figure out what a lot of the words actually mean. So yeah, here is how you do step 1 of the input repetition method, input. So consume extensively. Extensively just means not focusing on specific words. You're just consuming something. You're either reading or listening to it for pleasure. You're going through the whole thing. You're just kind of getting the gist of it. So think about it as if I made you read a page of Harry Potter, for example, in English, you wouldn't be focusing on what every single word means like you might do when you're reading in another language. You would just read over the whole thing and kind of you would know what it's about. I could tell you you could like tell me what it's about at the end of the page. Unless you had the memory of a goldfish, obviously. But yeah, that is reading extensively. So if you're going to read a book, just read the page, even if you don't understand every word, that's fine. Same goes with watching a YouTube vlog or a TV episode or anything like that. Just don't focus and pick out what every word means and don't go, oh no, I don't know what that word means. Just brush over it and kind of get the gist of it. If it's so hard that you can't understand what's going on at all, you have no idea, then it's probably too difficult and you need to find something easier. If you can get a rough idea, that's fine. If it is pretty difficult, but you're okay with pushing through that, that's also kind of fine, I guess. Just use your judgment, guys. Once you've read it extensively, you need to go back and re-consume it intensively. So you go back, reread the page, re-watch the show or anything like that. But this time you're not reading it for pleasure, you are focusing on unknown vocab. So what you're going to do is you're going to go through and kind of focus very, very intently on every single thing, and you're going to stop and write down basically every single word that you don't know. So you can put it, I recommend you put it straight into the flashcards, which we're going to talk about on the next slide. But yeah, you're making a list basically of all of the words you don't know so that we can memorize them in the next step. Cool. And yeah, that's basically it. As for how much you should read before you actually go back and make the list, if it's a book, you can read a chapter if you want. If it's a short chapters, you could go page by page. That might be a little bit painful. Just use your judgment, guys. If it's a TV episode, you can probably do like the whole episode. If it's a movie, that might be too much as a beginner. Just kind of whatever works for you. Happy to answer any questions in the comments as well. Now that we've done step 1 and we've read it, we understand the gist, we've reread it to make our list of unknown words, it's time to actually do step 2, which is the repetition part. So the best way to actually use repetition to get unknown information into your brain is to use flashcards. So create the flashcard stack. So I'd highly recommend you use digital flashcards, for example, Study Stack. It's completely free and online. I will have a link in the description. It's what I use, but you can use anything. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to put the entire vocab list of words you don't know and their translations in English into the flashcard stack. So if you don't know what flashcards are, I presume everyone does. Basically, you have a word on one side of the card or like a phrase, you flip it and it's got the translation on the other side. So you have to look at it. You can kind of know what it is and flip it. If you're right, that's cool. If you're wrong, you just have to keep doing it until you get it right. And yeah, name the stack after the content. So if it's like if it's the first chapter of Harry Potter in Italian, for example, you would name it chapter 1 Harry Potter in Italian, the stack that just for like organizational purposes. And yeah, you can have it there. Once you've made the stack, you need to memorize it. So you basically go through the stack. Any words you don't know, most apps, I know Study Stack has this, but most apps have a function where if you don't know the word, you can kind of swipe it into the don't know pile. If you do know the word and you flip it and you correct, you can swipe it into the do know pile. And then once you've gone through all the cards, you can reshuffle the don't know pile and do them again. And then you can slowly, put them back in the don't know pile or move them into the do know pile until you have no words in the don't know pile. And then you can kind of reshuffle all of them and just keep going again until you basically understand all the words. And then it's just about like doing it here and there to not forget it. And then basically when you keep reading, that should be enough to refresh the fact that you know the words. But yeah, start with passive recall as well. So passive recall basically means the word you're looking at is the word in the foreign language, and then you try and remember what it means in English, flip it over and check. The reason you start with that is because it's easier than the alternative. If you're not doing passive recall, you're doing active recall, where you look at the word in English and you have to remember what it means in the foreign language. That's a bit harder. So of course we want to do both, so we're well-rounded, but start with passive recall. Once you get pretty good at that, there's usually a button you can push that says like show definition first, so it'll flip all the cards. You look at the definition first and then you flip it back to the word in the foreign language. And yeah, so yeah, do both of those things. Add flashcards into your daily habit tracker and yeah, track your progress. Once you've made good progress and learnt like a good deal of the words in that stack, you can actually go back, rewatch the episode for a third time or reread the book or the chapter or whatever. And you should find that if you reread it extensively, not only will you get the gist, but you'll actually understand like way more of the words than before. And you should find it fairly easy. And that's because you've successfully done the input repetition method. And once you've done that, of course, you can move on to chapter 2 or the next episode or that kind of things. And you've learnt a bunch of words. So yeah, just a few tips and tricks while we're here. So number 1, digital flashcards. You can definitely do physical flashcards, but it's just a pain in the bum because it takes way longer to make. They can get destroyed easily, lost, all those kinds of things. Just use digital flashcards. And you can also find, if you're using a website like Study Stack, you can actually search up a topic, for example, Russian animals or Italian food. And you can actually download other people's stacks that they've already made. So you don't even need to make the cards some of the times. Obviously, if you're making it for a specific like chapter of a book, you probably will need to make it. But if you want to download somebody else's, that's like really easy and it's completely free. So yeah, use digital flashcards, just easy to use. I would say also when you're consuming things you actually enjoy. So obviously if you're a complete beginner, you might have to read some like fairy tales and stuff. That might not be particularly fun, even though it's not that bad. But yeah, once you get good enough, like watch shows that you enjoy, read books that you enjoy. I've watched a couple videos on just like when I'm learning Russian, obviously, that's the language I'm learning now. Just on the Russian system of government, because I think it's kind of interesting learning about that. You can read Wikipedia pages if you want. I've actually already made a video on how to kind of read things you enjoy and that kind of stuff if you want to check that out. But yeah, just make sure you're kind of doing things you enjoy, because after all, those are the things you're going to want to talk about in any language, because they're your kind of hobby. So yeah, try and do that. I would say use subtitles, or at least have a transcript if you're watching or listening to something, just because it can kind of be hard to record words if you're just listening to them. So yeah, you can auto-generate subtitles on most things. I am actually looking into trying to find an app that can listen to things for you and put them into a transcript if you can't make subtitles for it. I haven't actually completely found one yet, but I'll keep you guys posted because that would be really useful. But yeah, just try and have like a transcript or something. You can get them for most podcasts and that kind of thing. But yeah, output ASAP as well. So we've talked about input. If input is reading and listening, output is writing and speaking. So once you've kind of learnt new words, try and incorporate them into your daily journaling. You can write a short story. You can just monologue to yourself out loud. Just try and find a way to use them. And yeah, that'll help cement the knowledge into your long-term memory, and definitely take some phrases in context as well. So for example, instead of just copying words, you can take some like phrases and sentences you don't fully understand. Phrase, for example, would be, where do you live, in your language you're learning, and put that into your flashcards as well. The reason is because languages just do like say things different. Like for example, in Russian, they say, instead of saying how old for you, they say the equivalent of how many years are you? Or in Italian, they say how many years do you have? So yeah, languages just kind of do different things. And yeah, just trust me on that one. Taking some phrases is kind of useful for understanding, because they don't really speak literally. That's kind of why, if you've ever heard someone speak English and it's not their native language, they kind of just phrase things differently as well. That's totally normal. It's just because the different languages just say things in different ways, even within their own language. So yeah, just trust me on that one, guys. Bottom line is the input repetition method is something I've coined, and obviously I'm sure other people do something like it as well, but I've kind of figured it out, and it does work super well for learning new words. I did once learn, this is not bullshit as well, I'm dead being completely serious. I once learned 200 Russian words in a single day. Obviously, I didn't fully memorize all of them, like I had to, keep going over it for the next few days, but I did learn 200 Russian words at one point in one single day, with a lot of spare time, obviously. But yeah, that is kind of how useful it is. So definitely hit the subscribe button, guys. If you do have any questions, happy to help anyone with anything. And yeah, links to my website and Discord. Definitely implement what I've talked about. And yeah, have a good one.